In a world that's always shouting, whisper, because those that are meant to hear you will. I think this is very good advice for the present moment and the storm that's upon us, because everything tries to get our attention, to distract us. And as we know, algorithms have been created in order to really almost vampirically distract individuals away from their own energy into a type of consumerist mind that says you must buy something in order to feel complete, you must have likes in order to be likable, and we end up playing a game that moves us further and further and further away from what truly matters. And that's why I started by saying, in a world that's shouting, whisper. Because essentially the shouting, the match, is that which never allows us to be centered, never able to ask the question of what is it in this movement of my own consciousness that I'm actually experiencing now. And as they often say, that those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. But I think the redundancy of history is we never learn from history. But we're reaching a point where the history itself is starting to inform us. Why have we never listened to history? Well, in a way, it's part of a sense that there's a progress, there's a way we can get somewhere. There's a land of Shangri-La where we'll all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And yet that never happens. It's promised, but it doesn't happen. So the question then becomes, where can I ask the questions that I must ask? And who is this I that is asking the questions? And when I ask, how do I go inside, I don't even know what that means oftentimes. So the question now is, we must become, to a great degree, the bearings by which we begin to navigate our human story. If we begin to understand that distraction and dissipation are the call of the day, essentially, meaning, can I make you angry all the time? Will you spend money because I've made you angry? Will you buy defense or security systems because I've made you afraid? Will you worry about your health because you can no longer trust the genius of your own body? All of these things are programming us to look at ourselves either as victims or as weak or as incapable. And my understanding and my life experience has led me to understand from a particularly central point of view, which is that we must reclaim constantly. That's the teaching of history. That the individual, not the general, as much as we would generally hope it would all work out, in a way, it's like hoping the storm doesn't happen, and it always does. And you think, well, why is there a storm? What's the point? Well, the point of the storm in the human psyche is to try and bring us back to the realization that what is within us is projected without. It's like a dream. We see it in the outer world and think it's not us. And therefore we react to it and think, oh, if I condemn that or I don't like it, it'll somehow change. But it's a bit like shouting at the ocean, which is why shouting is always a bit like shouting at the ocean. It does nothing but reinforce that we are angry about something and that we're not willing to listen. And if you think about gaining access to yourself, part of the great key and code is listening. That's why I talk about whisper. In other words, that which whispers inside of you, that isn't able to be heard if all you do is rumble and roar about the inhumanity and the injustices and the cruelty and the stupidity of the human condition, because it's true, that is part of the human condition. But you are the part of the human condition that brings to the table that whisper that says, maybe love is possible. Maybe I can't convince the neighbor that it is, but maybe where I am, I can. And maybe I can honor these things like a gardener. And if I do, maybe I can't grow a garden that is the garden of the world, but I can start a world within the garden that says, at least here. Let us whisper together. Let us realize that the timeless elements of love and humanity aren't the things we discover in time. They're not, we don't progress there. There's no app, there's no technology, no cyborgian reality that we're going to plug in and suddenly get rid of the emptiness that plagues the human psyche, no matter how much you have. You can be a billionaire, you can have 15 houses and helicopters and boats, you're still feeling empty. The reason is because there's no real meaning. There's only objects, there's only stuff, more stuff. And if I have more stuff, then maybe I'll have everything I want, and we never do. And that's history. Teaches over and over the same lesson. If you have the Midas touch, you might turn everything into gold, but then you can touch nothing and nothing touches you. So this is actually a question for our inner selves. What do I value? Do I think those that shout the loudest in this world must be the most significant? Are they just the most noisy? Do I think the arguments that are being shouted at me are the most important arguments? Or are they just the most noisy? And I start to realize, no, they're just the most noisy. Because what really matters is when I look at my granddaughter or my grandson, or I look at my wife, or I look at my friends, or I look at my daughters. I say, this matters. This is real. Because we're not here for forever, no matter what the advertisements try to get us to buy. And we're not getting out of this because we can find a new drug that makes it all comfortable, because the discomfort is the very thing that always torments the human soul to realize, I can't get out of it. I wished I could. I wish I could take something and I'm out of here, guys, but it doesn't work that way. Because always the human heart says, why do you want to leave? Why do you want a relationship that's about going, or not being who you are, or only your discontent of how you are not who you think you ought to be? So I say, listen to that part within the self that is still whispering, that waits for you to turn and to say, this matters to me. I thought I could join into the shouting of the world and I'd feel better, and I never do. Never. So let me stop shouting so much. And let me turn back to my grandchildren, my children, my wife, my husband. Let me turn back to my family, my friends, my community. Let me turn back to the people in history that said, in spite of the darkness, I will still say yes. In spite of the difficulty, I will not be defined by the difficulty. In spite of that which works seemingly against me, you know what? I'll use it as a current and become a powerful swimmer. So let's swim these currents, but let's not shout. We'll get too much water in our mouth. Let's stay a bit more silent and whisper and take this journey of reclaiming the true point that we are human, and that is something noble and an adventure we all have been taking and worthy of praise, not our contempt. Thanks.